So we're going to have a free flow conversation on strategies for eating in a caloric surplus, because a lot of people struggle to do it for a long period of time. I've done it for about 2 years now. And then we're going to go on to some digestion talk and common problems that we deal with clients and with you guys will face that you can help develop solutions for gut-wise, digestion-wise, and caloric surplus-wise. So caloric surplus strategies for inner surplus to ease some of the burden. There's a lot. So basically, we begin with Fruit Loops and we end with Fruit Loops. And then this podcast is done, and that's it. No, I'm joking, guys. The point of that is cereals can be really helpful in the context of having low fiber, which is what you want to try and maximize for often to improve digestibility and not have your gastric motility take forever and speed that up. To have something hyper palatable, because there was some research, maybe you want to bring it up, that we talked about. It was between like soft foods and more harder foods, and the palatability and that changing the total volume you can eat. Do you remember that?
Yeah, that was a really, really cool study. I don't have that in front of me, but that was not just to do with the palatability, which palatability we would sort of say is like how yummy food is. This had to do with like texture and hardness. So basically the softer the foods were and the more easy they were to consume, the more were consumed. So there was like this kind of like overarching idea now that like looking at your diet and thinking about some of the things that you can include that are a little bit more crunchy, required a little bit more chewing involved, to assist, I suppose, with some of your appetite control. But I'm interested to know with you, man, because obviously, I coached you for a while, and we did a pretty decent deficit, didn't we? We got you pretty shredded, which was great.
That was one of the hardest physical things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, I punished you.
Yeah,
it was good.
And we had no endpoint, remember? Because I wasn't stepping on stage or anything. It was just I was going to go as far as you said, which we pushed me to think around 35, 34 millimeter skin folds.
Yeah, it was good, man. You were good. 9 sites. I think you're at 34 mil. And that's when I said, look, you look as good as you need to get. Like, I didn't see the point in you going any further than that.
Yeah. Can you give some context for people of like what that means to get that lean and then bounce back from it?
So look, I mean, what was your request? I can't remember. You just basically, you'd never sort of achieved a sense of leanness that you wanted to get. That's why you came to me, right?
It was like physical excellence.
Yeah. And so we took you, I can't remember your body weights and stuff. You'd have to fill in the gaps here, but like
69 kilos we went to.
Do you remember how many mils you were in your skin folds?
When I started with you? Yeah, I dropped from probably somewhere from like 70, 80.
There you go.
Millimeters.
Yeah.
And the context is about 35, you said, is about stage lean?
Well, kind of heading towards that 30 mark is like stage lean.
Yeah, close.
But as you start getting there, everyone's a little bit different at that mark. But I sort of said, look, getting you into the mid to low 30s, like you'll look amazing, And a lot of people ask, well, what's a sustainable kind of like body fat? And I sort of say, look, that's really individual. But most of the guys that I coach that are non-competitors, they just want to look good. I sort of say, look, if you can hover somewhere around about that 50 to 55 millimeter mark, generally what you can achieve is a look that you like, but also like, just a way of living and performing and energy and all these other metrics, which are just far more sustainable and enjoyable.
Absolutely.
But what I was more interested in, so we got you lean, and then we went through a muscle accrual phase. You wanted to kind of like experiment with a few things there, so we did it nice and slowly to start to try and keep this leanness for a while. And then there sort of became this inflection point where you were like, okay, I've been patient, and it's good to know what this looks like, sort of taking it on the slower side of things. But then, the priority became more muscle accrual, and you sort of had that realization, look, I'm going to let go of like the level of leanness that I may have initially expected, and allow myself to get to a point where I can really focus on the muscle building.
I think that was a really big, important moment I had, is that I had to let go of the identity of being someone who is really lean. I had to, and I say this to my clients, and I'm sure you have these conversations, like we attach our current self-image and identity to what we look like currently. And if you spend a long time in a deficit, you can begin to become emotionally attached to that. And I think that's very dangerous, because you need to understand, to reach higher levels of your physical mental potential, that old self, even that you got really lean, you got incredible shape, that person too must die. That person too must evolve from that. So at some point I realized And I had to make peace with the fact that, oh, my friend, I'm talking to myself here. You're going to lose your abs. You're not going to maintain them forever in order to reach the level of physical dominance and jackness that maybe someone like you has. You have to go through that process.
Give them an idea of the body weight. Like, what did you get down to when you were at your leanest?
I went from around 88, 87 kilos, and at my leanest, I was around 68 kilos.
Whoa, 68.
So
man.
I lost a 20 kilo weight plate.
Yeah. And
over 7-8 months.
What did the calories get down to?
Nothing, bro. For me, it was nothing. It was the lowest we got was around 1,500-1,600.
Yeah.
If you want to know more, I had a 45-minute video or just a big long article on my website that goes down the 17 lessons that I learned through that process. Maybe we can talk about some of them, but I just wanted to mention that. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so let's say you got down to 1,600 calories, which is low, right? That's really low. That hurts. And then, we obviously reversed out of that. So where are you now?
Now, on average, I'm pushing towards 4,200 calories. But to give you context, I just finished a 4 or 5 week aggressive cut.
Yeah. And body weight?
Body weight at peak before my cut, this little mini cut I had, was 90.6 kilos. It was the maximum.
So 22 kilos.
Yeah, in about 2 years.
In 2 years. Yeah, that's huge. Okay. And so, we started this talking about like eating in a caloric surplus. This may seem like such a strange conversation to people that don't ever try to do this, right? Like, what are you talking about? Like,
you need to.
But yeah, like, consuming 4,200 calories worth of food, it's a job for some people. And, some people can, struggle to do it, and they can have a lot of digestive symptoms like in that process as well. And was there an inflection point for you when you were raising those calories in which you noticed some digestive symptoms, or that you just noticed, oh wow, I've got to put more thought into this? Yeah,
that's a really good question, and it happens for me, and even some of my clients as well. But it happened for me around the 3,400 to 3,800 calorie mark. I'm like, okay, I need to be a lot more considerate here about my digestive support, my meal timing, my use of hyperpalatable softer foods, the use of smoothies, and things like that. So that was where the inflection point was, and that's where more intermediate and advanced strategies come into place.
Yeah. So that would have been around about, I don't know what your body weight would have been there. That might have been, you may have been somewhere between 80 and 85 kilos, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that'd be right.
So we'd be talking about the 40 calorie per kilo body weight mark, which is pretty much where I would find that. That's pretty common.
Yeah, interesting.
For guys. Yeah, around that 40 cal per kilo body weight is where you start having discussions with guys a lot. Like, hey, like I'm getting bloated, you know what I mean? Like there's changes in my bowel movements, I'm feeling sluggish. And then we just sort of like, may reconvene on some of the particulars of the diet.
On the bloating and the stool side of things, that's another thing I think you have to accept as part of the game, playing this game. Even I've done like gut protocols and healed my like bad gut issues like we've talked about. Even in spite of doing all those things, I had to accept that how is my stool and gut and bloating supposed to be ideal if I am shoveling a super physiological amount of food into my mouth like our ancestors never did? So you have to expect, like, how are you going to be not gassy at all, not bloating at all? You're going to be a little bit. It's part of the game you must accept, but there's many things you can do to curb the downsides. Like digestive enzymes help me significantly. I can cut my amount of bloating and gassiness down significantly with the use of that in big meals.
Yeah, and that's a pretty easy one, right? And I think that's like an important part of what you're talking about right there with was it digestive enzymes, or was it like the betaine hydrochloride with some of the herbs like gentian, those bitter herbs?
So Thorne's Biogest has betaine hydrochloride, which very few have, which was quite helpful to me, I think. But then I also use things like apple cider vinegar for that acidity. But I never tried the other like cholagogues or other acidity regulating foods that maybe you want to mention. Like
a Swedish bitters, like the artichoke and the burdock and the...
I played with artichoke. I didn't really notice seeing anything, but the ACV, apple cider vinegar, was the closest I got. Swedish bitters is aggressive. It's like fire.
Yeah, it is.
Do you play with that much?
Yeah, not personally, not myself, but with clients, yeah.
Okay.
I'll do things with you guys that I would never do, right?
Obviously.
But yeah, look, so let's kind of like build out a little bit of, because we've kind of skipped around already on a few things here. So some of the things I think to take care of when eating in a caloric surplus is kind of to realize first and foremost that there's going to be this point in which a perfection is probably not what you want to be aiming for, you know, and clients will get like this, you know, especially if like you put health way up on this priority list.
Yeah, I did.
But perhaps you have a goal, which is kind of like, look, it's fairly healthy, but it doesn't necessarily have to run in line with like optimal health, you know, trying to get down 40 calories per kilo or 50 calories per kilo body weight to achieve the muscle gain that you want to achieve.
Like, I don't think that's healthy. Like, I don't think getting jacked is healthy. Like, there's a certain amount of fat-free muscle, muscle that you want, lean body mass that you want for health, longevity. Absolutely. But I could stop right now. I should stop right now. The amount of muscle that you have, Ben, like most reasonable scientists could agree, is like that's not going to help longevity and minimize disease risk. But, you know, fuck that. Like, I'm here to dominate too right now.
Yeah, man.
And I know you are too with your fucking 300 kilo Mr. Deadlift man.
100%. And I think the same could be said for a dieting phase. So what I wanted to mention was this, is that some people are going to have an easier task of this than others. Do you know what I mean? Some people are going to put on size and they're just really never going to have to go over 40 calories per kilo body weight. You know what I mean? I got some of my guys, I'm like, Joseph, the seminar the other day, the dude grows like a weed on 33 calories per kilo body weight. I'm like, man, what's going to happen when we ramp this guy's calories up? But the same is true at a dieting phase. Like some people diet and they have to diet so hard and you're like, this isn't the healthiest thing you could be doing, because like for you to achieve the level of fat loss that we're trying to do within a given time frame, it's just so much harder, you know? And so I think that's kind of recognizing that, whether it's going into a caloric surplus or into a caloric deficit, some people are going to do it harder, and not to get too obsessed, I suppose, with doing it absolutely symptom-free. You know what I mean? We try to mitigate much as possible. That's what this conversation is going to be about, right?
But accept that there are trade-offs. There are always trade-offs to going into these phases, just like there's a deficit trade-off with fatigue and energy and training volume and sleep. The same is true of a surplus. So I would say we got to manage our expectations carefully. It's like, because we do put health on a big pedestal and quality of life, and that can begin to form a part of our identity. And then when we begin to engage in behaviors that may contradict it, there can be cognitive dissonance. Like, I had to reconcile, and this took me actually quite some time to reconcile, because I used to be way on the other side of like, fuck cereals, like fuck vegetable oils, organic all the way. I was paying $10 or $12 for a kilo of berries, or 800 grams of berries, right? No, 500 grams. Expensive for most people. I was all the way there. And then I started to learn like, oh, okay, these nuances probably don't make that much of a difference. I'm happy to be contended on if you have evidence of the contrary, or anybody listening. But you must manage your expectations of putting a pedestal of health. You have to put that in context of now your surplus and performance goals, that something has to give.
Well, it's exactly right. And isn't it funny when you'll have people that'll say, have that ideology around like, it's got to be whole foods. So, you know, cereals are processed food, and then they're chugging down some Vitago during their training session, like a liquid carbohydrate or something like that. And yeah, so I think like, you know, you had that on like the most wanted list back in the day, like your cereals, you're like, I'm not gonna touch that. And then I think as the goal changes, it's like realizing the utility in, you know, having bits in your diet which make it like far more sustainable.
Far more. Like there's only so much sweet potato and rutabaga and starches and rice and pasta you can eat before you're so full of fiber and backed up and just full.
Yeah.
These are tools. And in the context, like we talked about last time, in the context of a healthy lifestyle, largely healthy lifestyle, no unhealthy risk factors, high lean body mass, frequently exercising, stress management, sleep, etc., then why can't we incorporate these high-palatable foods? Because that is a tool, if we come back to the practical, the cereals, the honey, the maple syrup, the smoothies, the dried fruit. I couldn't recommend these things enough to put into your surplus to ease the burden.
Yeah. And I think that, like, let's make an important point right now, and that is that, like, you would always want to treat the caloric surplus just like your maintenance and deficit phases, where you are going to make sure that you optimize your micronutrition through whole food selection. You know what I mean? There's like no point in this discussion in which we're saying, oh, hey, like go all these like easy, hyper palatable, highly processed foods and eat a nutrient devoid diet. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's not what we're saying.
It's not what we're saying. But what we're saying is like have a good base that you know works for you, is sustainable, provides you with all of that healthy goodness, and then you're gonna need to afford yourself a certain level of flexibility to get those calories where they need to go. So, how do you make it easier? I think like the first thing we would say is like preparation, organization, scheduling. Don't get caught out having to consume like a lot of calories on the back end of the day. You know, you can make it really uncomfortable on yourself especially if you've gone from like lower calorie dieting phases, and you can get away with like longer periods between food or a little bit of time restricted feeding and going, oh, that actually helps when you're in a dieting phase sometimes, so you push back meals. That's the last thing you want to be doing when you're in a caloric surplus and, you might be having digestive issues. Okay. The bolus of food is going to get bigger. It's going to put more pressure on the digestive system. That can make it far more uncomfortable with people with symptoms.
That happens way too often to me. That's a mistake I commonly make because I'll work so much all day, every day, and I'll just get caught. I'll be like, all right, I got 1,500 calories left. Shit, boy, right? What am I going to do? And then I eat late, and this is me not being perfect here. You guys put Ben and I on a pedestal and all of us on a pedestal. This is me messing up. I'll eat too late, and then it'll start to interrupt my sleep. And my sleep quality will be measurably affected by me eating this giant amount of food half an hour before I sleep. I'm like, shit. But like, what's the alternative? It's like, all right, if I don't eat it, I'm in a deficit. If I do eat it, if I don't eat it, I can sleep better. But if I don't eat it, I'm not going to give enough calories.
This is the question that a client comes to you as a coach, and they're like, what's the better choice in that situation? They go, they're both shitty choices. Yeah. We've got to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And so, look, I mean, I like to just, think of simple things to tell people. I'm like, look, when is this the issue? And for most people, it's in the morning, right? Most people are kind of going, hey, I just, I got busy or whatever it was, or I was working or I wasn't thinking, and then I missed the first part of the day. And I'll be like, okay, so we just got to build out a framework here. So if we're trying to eat 4,000 calories, let's say that we want at least 1,000 calories in, before 11 o'clock, you know what I mean? And then like 2,000 calories in by, 2 p.m., 3 p.m. So just kind of like giving them, okay, break the day up, and let's at least make sure we have some kind of solution here to not end up in that situation where you've just got to backload everything in.
That reminds me of an example I like to give is, let's exaggerate the use case, meaning let's say you're struggling, in either way, let's say you're struggling for the deficit and you're on 2,500 calories. Go YouTube and Google a vlog or some people who have documented how they do a 1,500 calorie diet. And then go the other way and let's say you're struggling with 4,000 calories, like I have. Well, I started looking up people on much bigger than me. What's a 7,000 calorie strongman diet look like? And what you can do by taking those extremes is you can get some inspiration and practical examples of, well, there's people out there doing this on a much larger scale. What are they doing differently? And then you can mimic some of the principles and examples that they use. So that's where I've gotten some of my inspiration from to use. Like I had the same smoothie for 2 years straight. And then I saw someone put frozen mangoes, dates, and prunes in there. And I'm like, just that subtle change. And I got rid of the banana. Just that subtle change increased the palatability so much, I started enjoying it. So I started wanting to drink it more. So that's what I'm doing now. So there's also a variability element to it. Subtle variability in taste and texture can improve adherence.
Absolutely. And you just mentioned the smoothie, right? That's like another good way to get the calories. That's just back to basics. If you need some liquid nutrition, nice, easy way to get those calories up as well. And, you can do that with a lot of whole foods and turn the problem of like the satiety that you might get from these whole foods in their normal form versus like the ability to get them down in a liquid form, right? So you can get a little bit of the best of both worlds there.
I wonder if there's any other examples of like whole foods, strange whole foods that you could mix up.
Oh, there absolutely would be, man. And it's just a case of getting like that those ratios right between like the carbs and the fats and the texture. You know what I mean? Like just making it easy to get down. It's like that clusters. Well, it's still processed, right? But there's cluster cereal that I told you about the other day. We were out having all you can eat sushi, actually, weren't we, on Saturday night, and we were talking about like just eating a lot of food. And I found these clusters. By the way, I was wrong. I thought I found the holy grail here, which was like a clusters cereal with low fat. Remember?
Yeah.
And I thought, no, it's not.
Oh.
I did the biggest rookie mistake of all, and they've got the
Serving.
2 columns, the per servings column and the per 100. In my state of like juggling 2 kids in a Woolworths, I must have looked at the wrong column. So they are higher fat than what I thought. But this is to the point now when we're trying to consume more calories. It is so easy to consume more calories consuming a bowl of clusters in cereal than just like a bowl of like cocoa bombs and, just more of like a high carbohydrate one.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it really hard in my situation here. I'm trying to go over calories. I'm like, oh man, that's just nowhere near the serving size that I'd want right now.
You want more volume.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not in that level of caloric surplus.
Right.
So
that's how you can pull on the string of what I'd call density, like how dense, calorically dense is the food you're eating. So what's some of the densest foods, right? Well, a Cocoa Puff, and you can get, if some people may be, what about the gluten? That's cool. Just kick out the gluten to get the gluten-free Cocoa Puff, or get the gluten-free Cocoa Bombs, which have quite clean, generally pretty clean ingredients. Just some cocoa and some non-wheat flour. It's pretty benign for most people. And the volume of Cocoa Bombs, this is an example, they're little circular little balls, is much bigger than a Cocoa Puff, which gets really small. So that's an example that you can use. How can I think about density? Well, I could eat fruit, which would fill me up more, or I could put honey and maple syrup and jams in a smoothie or on some sourdough instead.
yeah. So what this conversation literally is taking everything that you've ever learned as a strategy for like a dieting phase and just flipping it.
Yeah.
Just putting it in reverse.
Yeah, that's
like,
really
like
good.
a lot of people already know like some of these things about like, hey, like how am I going to feel more full on this diet? Like what type of meals are going to make it easier for me? It's like, cool, just flip it all. That's like literally like the TLDR of this conversation.
Exactly. Just flip it.
Just flip it. And so like this is another one, right? So like what I'll talk about all the time is that concept of sensory specific satiety. You know what I mean? So, and the example of that is this. It's like the second stomach. And, you know, if you're out at a restaurant and you order like a bowl of pasta and you know, and a garlic bread, you're at an Italian restaurant, right? And you eat, well, not us, because we're gonna eat a lot. This is a bad example for guys like us, but for like normal people, you eat and you're full and like you've had to undo a belt buckle, right? And anyway, and then the waiter comes out and he's like, oh, the chef fucked up another pasta, the exact same one. And they go, would you like it? Now, most people are going to be like, oh, no, I'm full. You know, we might accept it. But most people, for the point, they're going to go, no. But then the barman comes over 2 minutes later and is like, guys, I made an extra chocolate mud cake. Would you like that? And all of a sudden you look at it and you're like, hell yeah, put that down. You know, I can get through that. And that's a case of this, that, you know, when we've got two different sort of foods with different characteristics, all of a sudden you can find that appetite. You know what I mean? So it's there straight away, that craving, that hunger, and you can get that food in. And so that's like that second stomach that they talk about, the dessert stomach. And so you can use this in a caloric surplus phase. Do you know what I mean? Like you have like your like whole food lunch or whatever it is, and then you might just have like a dessert to your lunch or a dessert to your dinner. You know? So I do this with guys all the time when they want like a really simple change and I've got to increase the calories, and I'll be like, oh, look, how do you feel about like a muesli bar after lunch? You know, it's like a 200 calorie increase here. It's like just like this little dessert, this little different thing after their lunch. They don't notice it whatsoever in the burden of that caloric increase.
Yeah, it's dense, but it's the palatability and the sensory experience of it is so much different. Like if you go for steak and then you go to something like a sorbet, like that's actually quite a, you know, if you can maneuver through the stereotype and stigma around sugar in healthy populations, then you can see how easy that could be to go from something like a steak, I'm full, put some sorbet in front of you, just sugar and water mainly, and you're like, oh, I can do that. That's an extra 300 calories. So when the goal is very big with your own personal health and fitness goals, you utilize strategies like that. And then it makes me think as well, training is this window that we don't take advantage of. If I thought someone was in a deficit, I would tell them, do not spend as long as time as possible not to eat after, because actually exercise can suppress your appetite. You're not as hungry, go have a shower, go chill out, go do some work, get distracted, and then maybe come back in a few hours, right? We reverse that. You just finished training. Before you even finish training, how can you get calories in when you train? It's probably going to optimize and maximize your intra-training performance anyway. Use something like a dextrose monohydrate, which is such a helpful game changer for me, because that's basically powdered sugar, powdered carbohydrates for those listening. You put that in your shake and you're drinking 50 to 100 grams while you're training. No, you don't feel full at all. You get an extra 400, 200 calories in the day. Easy,
bro. What else have we got here? Actually, I want to go back to what we just said about that sensory specific satiety. So this is, again, because let's just flip it back to the dieting phase here, because, there's undoubtedly, I think a lot of people listening to this are going to be more familiar with being in a dieting phase.
Yeah. And
this comes down to when we talk about the understanding that the diversity of foods is usually a good thing from the sake of a micronutrient perspective, giving yourself some insurance and that kind of thing. It's usually a good thing, fairly good thing. But when it comes to regulating your appetite, it may come with some drawbacks for that reason. Is that if you're at an environment where there's lots of different foods on display, like the buffet effect, you know what I mean? And you can go from eating one thing and then your eyes are looking over, you see something of a different set of characteristics, it's sweet or it's whatever, and all of a sudden you're pulled to eating that as well. So that can make it harder in the dieting phase to be around those environments.
Actually, I wouldn't mind talking about the deficit. I wouldn't mind talking about maybe some examples on the other end, because the sense I get is a lot more people can engage and relate to being in a deficit, want to lose weight, than they want to gain weight. And one thing I did, I remember some of the meals I ate. I didn't realize how much it was affecting me. I didn't realize what was happening to me. I just accepted it as normal. But I never told you some of the stories that when I was in my deficit phase, I didn't realize how lethargic I was. I was getting apathetic maybe I told you. I was getting apathetic towards life. I was starting to just not care about everything. I remember one time I was so fatigued. I was just lying or sitting on the bed and I needed to grab something. And I had no will. And I'm a guy with a lot of will, but it was like I was wearing a 20, 30 kilo weight jacket. And I know you know what this feels like because you've been in situations like that. And that was a lot of the days, and my expenditure was through the roof. I just started to stop driving and started cycling my bike everywhere, walking for hours, sauna. I was just on a mission. Now, what did I do with my food though? Started consuming something called konjac, right? Which is this Asian, I don't even know, root vegetable, I think.
Yeah, man, I had that probably 10 years ago when it first came out. It's like noodles and rice and stuff, right?
So I think the brand is Slendia.
Slendia. It's like rubber.
Oh my goodness. So I needed to find a replacement for pasta, because I couldn't have that. I could barely eat anything. And what this konjac is, konjac noodles, konjac rice, it's 98% water, right? And it's
2% rubber.
Yeah. But it had some of enough texture from pasta that I could close my eyes and just pretend like I was having some bolognese. I'm just that's some nice rubber right there. Right?
This is the crazy stories you get from everyone's got these stories when they go into a really hard dieting phase, right? And the thing about social media is I think a lot of the time, people that are getting that lean, they never, a lot of them don't share some of the crazy shit that you kind of do, the crazy shit, how you feel, how because you're on a mission, you know what I mean? And people, I suppose there's this marketing really out there to try and get you to believe that you can get like that with low effort. Everyone's looking for a shortcut. Everyone's looking like this, and it's
you're fucked.
Yeah, it's no, you want to look like that, you're gonna hurt. Ask people that look like that, the kind of hurt that that goes into that. And I'm if you're not cut out for that, don't do that. Don't make that your goal.
That's why I sat there for hours and wrote a long ass article because then I would send it to clients and be like, oh, you want to get this lean? Read this first, please. Okay. Because this is this amount of leanness requires such a huge amount of effort and consideration. Like for example, you're going to begin most likely when you sit around people and watch them eat, you're going to start disliking people for having the freedom and start resenting people for having the freedom to eat food. You start to look at people different. You're like, you can begin to make people feel bad for eating normally, and you start to put your own values and pressure on that you're putting on yourself onto them. So someone might be eating a normal healthy meal and you're looking into the side and you're like, what the fuck they doing? What they fucking eating next to me? And that can confer over into your communication of how you treat them in a bad way. So it has a ramification socially as well. You need to be mindful of that. And I realized, I'm like, what am I doing? What am I doing to the people around me? I'm like, this is my choice. So I have to be very, very, very mindful to just calm that down and just suffer in silence. Would you like more?
No, I mean, I just love those stories. It's like, Lorenzo, one of my clients.
He's pushing.
He's out of it now.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Okay.
So again, it's a sort of similar goal to you, actually, like Lorenzo, right? He wanted to kind of like push it. He basically wanted to experience kind of nearly what it would be like to get on stage without going maybe the last 10%. You know what I mean? Which is kind of what you wanted, really.
Yeah.
So we just did it. The guy looks amazing, but he's also a bit of a foodie. Like he had his pizza shop for 10 years, and the guy knows how to cook. So in the Discord, he's putting up all these foods that he's making with low calories.
Yeah.
And the guy's so inventive, and I'm like, this is what comes out when people are in these severe deficits.
Absolutely.
Your little rubber story.
Yeah.
You're like, there's like everyone's just getting off on these like meals where, especially when you're eating 4,000 calories, you're looking at it and you're just like laughing. You're like, what are you doing? But this is the kind of thing that gets people through,
And you shout out to Lorenzo, because he, you know what, guys, you can actually see it in the nutrition section of our Discord. If you're looking for like clever recipes, like Lorenzo has put quite a few like really good low calorie, tasty stuff in there that I'm just kind of bookmarking for later.
Yeah, I told him he needs an Instagram account for that.
Absolutely. But what was I going to say? I was going to say about eating, like more strategies. So we're talking like, all right, I had the rubber noodles, and yeah, you can use fasting, but there's more you can do. And it's escaping me right now. God damn it.
I've always kept it pretty simple, man. So like the only times where I've dieted this hard is obviously for bodybuilding shows. And I think really the only thing I ever really played around with was just leaving more carbohydrates towards the evening, because that's when I would like to consume them, just sort of in my unwind for the day. But I wouldn't really practice too much fasting. Like the only time that would happen would be by accident, just by what you said before.
Because you want to get like 3 protein feedings in. You want to try and maximize muscle protein synthesis and not have so much degradation.
Yeah, exactly. Like as a bare minimum. And also like, I love eating, especially during those calorie deficits, and the output is so high with those training sessions. You want to sit down and eat to kind of like fuel yourself to some regard. It doesn't have to be carbohydrates. Like I'm always someone who's gotten away with performing quite well, on just average carbohydrates anyway. But one of the things I would maximize is just my low calorie vegetable intake. Like I would go to town on like celery and carrots and cucumber. You know what I mean? I would get like a lot of volume through in those salads. But that was it. I never bothered doing anything creative. And then, people would ask me that, and I would just say, listen, I like to just go into a robot mode, and what I don't know, I don't think about. And if I start thinking about like making things more palatable and taste better, then I start seeing that, and my focus and my attention becomes that. And then I'm like, got a whole nother set of decision making that I've got to worry about.
It can become a tipping point, and then it can, But there are now with technology, with food technology, there are so many low or 0 calorie options for making a deficit easier. Monk fruit and erythritol is an incredible natural sweetener that you can use, that essentially is mostly metabolized and is excreted rather, and is not absorbed as energy. And that's a great replacement for sugar if you want to make things sweeter. They got these jams, these like almost 0 calorie jams that they're not perfect, but they kind of replace the sweetness and the caloric density of a normal jam, and you can get just a little bit of sweetness from these jams, these like Nutraviva, whatever it's called, vegetables. First person who said this vegetable to me, I think I said it earlier in our podcast. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, of course, Dave O'Brien would have some like wild ass recommendations. Rutabaga. You got to eat rutabaga. What the hell's a rutabaga, Dave? Is that English? It's actually called a swede. And a swede is a root vegetable that has characteristics similar to a potato, but it's much less calories. So while I was in my dieting phase, my gut protocol with him, I was also trying to gain mass. I swear, I must have cooked 700 grams, maybe nearly a kilo of rutabaga in one sitting just to get more calories in, because Dave's like, oh, you can't eat certain starches because, the certain gut issues that were going on. We can't feed the bacteria. So I was slamming that. And I would just sit there miserable, just eating away at my sad rutabaga. But it can be a good tool to use if you're in deficit, because it has characteristics similar to potato.
Did Dave want you in a caloric surplus when you were working with him, working on all that? Did he try to deter you from that, and you put your foot down and go, no, I want to focus on building as well?
I think it was, yes, he did try. In the beginning, we avoided a surplus, but towards the middle to end stage of a new protocol where we were focusing on other issues, he was like, all right, we can do a little surplus.
Yeah, okay, cool.
Because
it would have surprised me otherwise.
No, he doesn't like a surplus in a gut
because this actually just goes back to the initial conversation, right? So I quite commonly will get, particularly a lot of female clients that want to go into a mass building phase, but historically have always suffered from these symptoms when they try to consume more food.
Yeah, we need to fix that.
And there's always this conversation at the start, then like, can I get them both done at once? And I'm like, no. And you probably can. Like, don't get me wrong, but I don't want to create I don't want them to think that it's feasible straight off the bat, because in most cases when someone's got some gut symptoms that they're still working on, it is just so much easier to just sort of say, hey, can we not focus on being on a caloric surplus right now? Figure out like what's going on here. Is it got to do with your stress? Has it got to do with your digestion? Has it got to do with certain foods triggering you? Like, there's just some certain basic fundamentals that might be giving some of these symptoms. And one of the confounding things that you want to take away is just putting so much burden on the digestive system by the sheer amount of calories coming in.
Correct.
So just like, let's just clear that away, see if we can hone in on like what the problem is here, correct it, come up with better solutions, and then build into this building phase.
That might be a nice segue, unless you want to talk about anything with surplus more. There might be a nice segue to talk about gut issues, because we'll go to that root cause first. We've done a digestion and gut workshop in our Discord. The link's below if you want to see it. And we talked about many of these strategies, and we'll probably do some more in the future. Is there some solutions or common problems that you see that you commonly go to address those gut issues?
Yeah. Look, the workshops that we do, I don't know, we would say are probably going to be surprising in the fact that they are probably going to be so much more simple than what people are expecting.
Yeah.
Because what we find is that like 99% of people with common digestive complaints can solve these complaints just through some of the basics, which we're kind of already alluded to in this discussion, and so instead of going straight to thinking about doing stool testing or gut protocols or anything like that, I think it's just working with someone that helps you kind of like actually look at like what your setup is, and then start to piece apart, okay, like where are we starting to see these problems, And it could be as simple as like understanding how someone's consuming their foods throughout the day. Like, are they cramming them, like we've just talked about? Are their sleep and stress just so suboptimal that the digestive system is lacking, and it's just more of a problem on like behaviors and scheduling and stuff like that that's going to lead to like a really high return on investment, bettering these symptoms. I
think people aren't bought in right now. I think they're listening and they'll be like, oh, that sounds good, Ben, but like, oh, what about the 17 supplement protocol and all the... So I'm going to tell a story, and I'm sure you have some... I'm going to call this client B, right? This client B came to me about 7 months ago, and she... Bad gut issues, bad anxiety, on the pill, just emotionally volatile, bloating, gassy all day, every day, like chronically. So it wasn't even specific to a food. I'm looking at this and, I want to do some testing. So we do some testing because it is quite severe. And I like doing that if it's a particularly severe case to get to the root cause immediately. Right? I'll try to assess it. And then, we say, okay, we confirm with symptoms and blood work and some testing that, all right, SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. But she sees gastroenterology. She gets antibiotic rifaximin prescribed to her, but she has some other issues at the time with ulcers that we deal with first before we do that. And thankfully, she did that and didn't go on this. We didn't do this full antimicrobial antibiotic protocol because over the next 7 months, we would begin to work heavily hard on unwinding. I would say maybe 6 or 7 different lifestyle, nutrition, deficiency, stress management, sleep issues, exercise issues. And it wasn't overnight, but over the next 6-7 months to this day, she went from like an 8-9 out of 10 bloating, anxiety, gassiness, and I tripped out in our last check-in because she is so different. I'm looking at it, I'm like, what it's like 2s and 3s out of 10. And she's so casual about it now because she's like a different person. Like, yeah, it's just, yeah. And I got out of my chair and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, do you remember? And we didn't do any protocols. We didn't do any like formal supplement, $500 of supplements. We did some things here and there, but we supplemented and told you, but we worked heavily on lifestyle and stress management and sleep and all these other things. And 6-7 months later, without that big protocol, she was fixed or like massively improved. And I'm like, oh, it's revealing itself to be very powerful.
Yeah.
These changes that don't need to cost an arm and a leg.
And the thing is this, guess what would have happened if you had gone after that with 17 supplements?
Yeah.
Okay. You might have got some short-term relief.
Yeah, sure.
Some symptomatic relief.
Yeah.
How long would that have lasted if nothing else changed?
Yeah. As long as you're only taking the supplements, maybe.
It wouldn't have stuck.
Yeah.
Do you know? And that's the point. And that's what, and let's just be real here, because like if you are suffering from like a lot of, digestive issues and it's been plaguing you for a while, maybe you've seen different professionals, it can be really, really frustrating. So there's no doubt there about that. So we're not belittling at all, but what we're saying is that like a lot of people are quick to want to go to the flashy thing. You know what I mean? A supplement, a protocol, a scheme, because it creates kind of like this boxed kind of like a diagnosis, it's like, oh, I have this, I've got to do that. There's certainty in this. And what we're describing is, look, there's some things here that haven't really been given a shot. And that is just like looking at stress management and some of these behavioral things, some of these foundational nutritional things for a length of time frame, which might, and also a tracking of these symptoms that's meticulous.
Yes. Which
it's really important. So I got blown away earlier this year where I had a client come to me who had this like 12-month track record of their symptoms with gut. And I remember just going, damn, no one does that. Even if they've got like, even if they've been plagued for years and years with gut symptoms. And so when they're trying to recall the specific triggers or preceding events towards some of these things, it's gray, it's shady, it's not the best data a lot of the time because it's heavily reliant upon our memory, okay?
Which is fallible.
Yeah, and so one of the things that you and I will do, when we're coaching clients like this is we'll have a meticulous set of symptom tracking that we're looking for with some, scaling systems for certain systems.
Yeah, color coding.
Yep, with like a way of like asking each week in the check-ins, like, hey, like trying to piece together the things that aren't captured within the numbers as well.
Absolutely.
That really important details that are not captured in just some of that, the numerical data. And then from there, like you start finding these triggers, you start having big realizations. And the best thing is, this is the best thing, is when a client has these realizations before they even get in, like they're filling out the check-in. You read it before the check-in call and you're like, they've figured it out themselves. You know what I mean? And that's empowering, right? For them to kind of realize up until getting into having a system of meticulous tracking, they couldn't quite realize that some of these contributing factors, like this type of food group or after this amount of sleep problems, you know what I mean? Like that these symptoms would get really bad. And so they're solving it themselves. And that creates all this skin in the game, this buy-in into some of these factors that are not the $400 worth of supplements that we could have done for 12 months.
No, just being aware and tracking your metrics, because what gets measured gets managed. And if you're relying on your memory, then it's random, and random actions get random results. So that's why, Ben and I have, a very, not particular, like we look at the details and we put together the pieces of the puzzle. It's like a blur. The analogy is like, maybe you're short-sighted and you need glasses or contacts. Well, that's what it's like when you're not tracking. It's just everything's a bit blurry. It's like, I think it was this. We put the glasses on and we could see 2020 when we're just tracking the numbers, and we can see where the trends are. It's a difference between like looking at your bank account, just one little, like half of the numbers. It's like, how much money do you have? It's like, I don't know, kind of.
Yeah. And to your point before about this client as an example, right? This like, again, this is like one of those realizations I love. I love getting a gut client who then has a holiday planned, right?
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. You know where I'm going, right?
Tell them.
And they have this holiday plan. Like, look, I want to start coaching with you, but I've got this holiday for 2 weeks in 6 weeks' time. Like, is it a good time to start? And I'm like, yeah, it's a great time to start. Because I have a little experiment that I want to do, and it's going to involve basically us seeing how you go when you're on holiday and you don't have like all the stressors of, and your habits that you have when you're at home, in your normal environments and things like that. And I can't put a number on this, but like a surprisingly high amount of individuals will have a drastic, very significant improvement in their gut symptoms when they're away on holidays, and they are eating things they wouldn't usually eat, which they would attribute to being really big contributing or triggers in these symptoms. They might be consuming some alcohol, which maybe they know, that's a problem too. Their sleep might be a little bit worse because maybe they're staying out and doing things and there's more travel involved, yet their symptoms are so much better. And I'm like, cool. Do we realize now that it's not as much of a gut problem as what we're attributing it to?
That's a beautiful example. I'll tell you, I got a story like that. When I traveled to America, I went to New York City and New Jersey, and when I was doing that, I was dealing with my gut issues and working with Dave. And we like, all right, we'll circle back after because you're going to be eating a bunch of different stuff. However, before I left, diarrhea, bad stools, bloating, gassy. Almost as soon as I land, within the day of me landing, 70-80% of that goes away. I'm like, what? Because I had a normal bowel movement. I'm like, what? I'm in a different country. I'm eating different foods. I'm eating gluten. I mean, all the shit that we said to avoid. I am confused. And I didn't know as much as I know now. I'm like, oh, you just massively change your environment. You detach some of the remove some of the stresses, the environmental influences. I'm like, shit.
Man, did we talk about this on the podcast with Olivia where we were talking about the sleep? And I think I might have told her that story. She was asking me about, hey, what do you do with clients that call themselves, oh, that's right. It was like she was talking about the phenotype of different, like the wolf phenotype. Yeah, whatever that is.
Call them chronotypes.
Chronotyping, sorry, yeah. And I think I must have said something to her along the lines of like, yeah, get these people to go out and camp for 2 weeks without their phones. And then I want to see like really like how much of a wolf chronotype they are. It's the same deal. Like what we're talking about here, like by going on holiday, like removing a lot of these like behaviors and stresses and just the way that we are constantly turned on. And, we get to this point where, our lives are so busy and we're probably not giving the body a very conducive environment towards, being optimal.
Yeah. And just being healthy. And so...
But there definitely are some things like in terms of like even the constipation and diarrhea that we talk about in the gut workshop that's in the Discord that I think noteworthy as well. And so, if you get a client with constipation, like what are some of the things that you're thinking of?
Like, come on, guys. All right. So we're going to look at hydration, number one, right? It's actually, everybody thinks they're hydrating. All right. Oh, yeah, I drink water. I drink plenty of water. Look at this bottle. This bottle is 1.8 liters. I drink at least 2 of these per day. All right, let's drink some water. People think they're hydrated, and I think they have no idea how much water they're drinking because they don't measure it and they don't even have a bottle around them. Okay? You think you're doing something, but perception and reality are two different things. So hydration. I'll calm down. Fiber can go two ways. We know it can exacerbate gum symptoms, and we know it can make it better. So we'll look at fiber. All right. What is it? 10 grams per 1,000 calories consumed, I believe, from that research. Number 3, I'm almost hesitant to bring it up because they're quite powerful, but there's a certain fruits. One of them, in clinical research and in our experience, we'll just give it to you, is kiwis. There was these studies, I think it was 2 times 2 kiwis per day was done on constipated patients or subjects, and they noticed significant improvements in gut motility or rather bowel movements. So if you're constipated, try kiwis. There's another one in there, but I think we'll leave that for, maybe the Discord if they want to see it in the workshop. And then toilets.
Oh man,
Toilets.
we got to get Donnie to bring up the picture from the Discord.
Donnie, there's a photo in the Discord of me sitting on a toilet. Now, I'm not sitting on any regular toilet. I'm sitting on a Squatty Potty. What is a Squatty Potty? It's this crazy contraption that our ancestors used to use. No, it's not really. It's just putting yourself in a position to actually defecate effectively. A toilet is a very inefficient, ineffective position to take a poop, okay? Because we're in this 90-degree angle with our knees, and you gotta think, what's the easiest way to go to the bathroom? It's to be in a squatting position. So what you wanna do is you wanna elevate your knees towards your hips. This is why intuitively people lean forward. You lean forward. Why? Because it's easier. Why? Because it's relaxing the puborectalis muscle, and it's increasing this colorectal angle. So like a kink in a hose, it releases the kink, and they can just slide down like a water slide. You should not have to push. I don't push at all, which is crazy, right? Donnie's out here laughing at me. I don't push.
You just unkink.
I just unkink, baby. So all you got to do, elevate your feet. If you're constipated, you don't need to buy supplements. You just need to go to your toilet, elevate your feet, put your feet on a stool first. Sport. And then we can talk about all the other stuff. That's free. You could just, what I do when I travel. I'll tell you what I do when I travel. I'm completely fine with this. When I travel, I'm like, oh, no stool, Donnie. What do? All right. I go to the bedroom. I'll probably grab about 4 or 5 pillows. And I just do pillow stack. And I'll put my feet on the pillow. Hopefully no one's sleeping on that. But that's all right. It's not my problem anymore. Or I grab the bin or the stool. One time, I think I was traveling in Thailand or something, and I used their bin and stool, and I realized it was made of straw or something really weak, and I broke it. So just be careful that you have to be careful that the stools you're using are made of hard substances. But that's the lengths I will go to have a healthy bowel movement.
I love it.
But that's really practical, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's, what do you want me? You want, you don't need to worry about the guar gum yet. Don't worry about it yet.
That's good, man. I'm trying to think what you haven't mentioned. Okay. Let's talk about an acute need. Oh, and I got another thing as well. Okay, cool.
True. That's
so
good.
let's talk about an acute need first. So let's say
emergency.
Really backed up. It's an emergency. You got to go. This is where. So if you go to a health food, like a supplement shop, health food shop, whatever, you'll often see products that something along the lines of a colon cleanse or labeled something similar. On the back, you'll usually see it's like a magnesium, and it's a magnesium oxide. And so the type of magnesium, and it'll be a very large dose. So it might be along the lines of 2 grams, 2,000 milligrams of magnesium oxide. And the reason we do that is because it sort of it goes down into your bowels. There's a lot of it, and so there's this osmotic gradient where basically the body is going to fix that by flushing water into the bowels. It wants to dissolve it for us, okay? And then that flushing of water into the bowels will kind of signal us to have a pretty necessary bowel movement. Okay, so it's not the nicest way in the world to get the job done, but when you need a job done, that's kind of the supplemental equivalent of a laxative in a way, okay? So that could be on the cards for some people. Okay.
And can we, maybe it's a good idea to define constipation, because people think because they just haven't gone to the toilet in a day or two, they think they're constipated. And I think, first of all, you're not. There's a certain criteria. I can't remember if you remember exactly. I believe it was at least 3 to 4 days of not having a bowel movement. Another one of the criteria was straining and pressure. Is there anything else I'm missing?
No, but I think the criteria on frequency is a little bit...
conjecture, like argued?
Yeah, no, I think it's a little bit less than that.
Less? Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head. We can probably bring that up.
Pull that up, Jamie.
Yeah. No, look, the other thing I would say is this. So this is something I haven't been able to find any studies on this, but something that I have noticed and I think is worthwhile just mentioning, in that, like, sometimes I'll get a client that's doing a lot of time restricted feeding, okay, like a intermittent fasting, and they're doing like a afternoon through to evening food intake, and they'll come to me. That's the way they've been eating, and they're constipated. You know, they don't have bowel movements easily. They don't have them every day. They don't move them in the morning. And like the elephant in the room here for me is that there's probably some element of like perhaps shifting a meal to early on that might, if you give it enough time, sort of prompt someone to have a bowel movement like after that meal. There seems to be, with a lot of clients that I have, a benefit of perhaps putting that on the cards. Okay, it's not something which I've found ever gives a immediate kind of resolution, but I just think it should be something. I'd love to see like a well done study on that to see if it like improved some people's bowel movements that were doing this intermittent fasting, for instance.
Okay, yeah.
And that's not to say everyone who intermittent fasts suffers from these symptoms. It's just something that's like a little bit of the elephant in the room. If I've got someone who's, I think, could potentially be a contributing factor.
Okay. But, remember, it reminds me, reducing your calories in general is going to reduce the total volume and frequency. It's normal. If you don't, like when I was in my deficit, some days I wouldn't go. Yeah. Well, of course, you don't have much to excrete because you're not consuming and you're using a lot.
Yeah. Man, there's plenty of competitors out there that, when they're in their dieting phase before their shows and, calories are low, they're not having those bowel movements and they're desperate to, want those bowel movements. And that's a conversation you're having. It's like, look, your calories are so low now. Expenditure, output's so high. There's going to be very little left with a lot of these bowel movements.
Will bodybuilder competitors go to like laxatives and things like that?
Many do. Myself as a coach recommending that to clients, not normally.
Yeah.
I'm not totally against it. Again, you got to sort of like treat each client, as an individual with that.
Okay. I wanted to maybe bring up indigestion and just maybe acid reflux and things like that, or even nausea as well. I don't know. We haven't talked about this before, but I don't know if you have any strategies off the top of your head for nausea. I got 2 common ones, but I just wonder if you have any off the top before I bring them up.
Well, they can be really different. Like, what have you got for nausea? What are you thinking?
Well, nausea, ginger. But like not just having a little bit of ginger before your meal like we did at the Japanese restaurant, but like maybe ginger capsules, something a little bit more potent, and peppermint, or like a peppermint oil. And those are 2 things that I have used with some success.
Yeah.
But I don't have like a nuclear bomb for nausea.
No, I wouldn't say that I have anything better than that for nausea either.
Because it's so non-specific.
Yeah. And it's just probably not the main gut symptom that I find I have clients coming with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Indigestion, far more common, absolutely. And I think, we've already touched on some of the things that could be very useful for that, whether it's, betaine hydrochloride, whether it's looking at some of the botanicals that can stimulate like a lot of the gastric juices, like even bitter things. So bitter foods like fennel, daikon, artichoke, radish. These are all bitter foods that have properties in them that can be very beneficial for the digestive tract. And the thing is if we look at like a lot of the clients that you work with and you go through a food history with them, how much bitter foods do you think people eat now?
Rare. It's almost no one eats them. Even me, I don't really even eat them.
I would say the same, man. Like, I don't intuitively go to bitter foods when I'm thinking about like putting my meal plan together.
Yeah, I have to make a very conscious effort to.
You got to remember it, right? It's just like, what are you eating that's bitter? I mean, Yeah. And so I think like if you're not even thinking that step, then it's just so easy to skip over it. Like, you know, when I'm looking at like diet histories and stuff like that, there's very little times that I can remember where I'm seeing a decent amount of bitter foods in there, which have these properties which can, for some people, improve their digestive system.
I know we have here some like botanicals as well, like mastic gum, slippery elm, aloe, quercetin.
Yeah. They're very popular in like the type of supplements that are traditional gut supplements, you know, like mastic gum and quercetin and things like that. And I do think there's a place for them. Like one of my strongman boys that I posted up about recently, he came to me, big guy, lots of calories as you can imagine, but chronic burping and indigestion. Like every day, high severity, needing medication.
So you went straight to that just to give him something quicker, more effective.
there was a lot going on with this guy actually. So there was a lot of moving parts from just a health perspective overall, but like underlying that, yeah, I used a product that had these nutrients in it, and I think a type of zinc carnosine as well, and it worked really well to the point where basically, like you mentioned about before with your client, over that 7-month period before you actually had to do anything with the gut symptoms, and it was almost gone. Like you just realized you'd gone from like 8s to like 2s and 3s. Yeah. With him, it was actually over a much shorter time frame. Again, we did go in there with a supplement, right? Or 2 supplements. And over around about, I think it was 14 weeks. I think that was the time frame. It went from everyday high severity, and then over probably 4 to 6 weeks, it went to moderate severity every kind of other day. So it was like halfway here. Yeah. And then by 12 to 14 weeks, it was gone.
Yeah, he stopped recording it, right?
Stopped recording it.
Yeah.
It was just like, bro, it's gone. Like I'm not burping. I have no reflux. Like, you know, it's amazing. And admittedly, there was definitely some changes just to the diet and just kind of recognizing, hey, don't kind of like eat. Again, it was like there was a lot of backloaded calories, a lot late at night calories. It was just about kind of like putting into place some of the fundamentals that we've just talked about. And then me kind of recognizing you probably are the type of client where I think just us going in there with a few of these supplements is probably not a bad idea. And here's what happens. I always like to unsupplement people. Yeah. So these are not staples. That's what I sort of say. I'm like, they're like, how long do I have to take this? And I'm like, well, hopefully for the most little amount of time as possible. And then the question is, well, what happens when I come off then? Is it going to get worse? And I'm like, well, if it gets worse, then we know that we haven't really fixed the problem. And then we reassess what's going on. But if you never come off, you don't know if you need it. And I think a lot of people get stuck in that trap with supplements. It's like, I just use it because like I don't want to get any worse. And it's like, but unfortunately you have to test, you know, if you're carrying around some of these symptoms, like don't live in fear, test it. You know what I mean? Like come off and see what happens. And especially with like a lot of these gut symptoms, I coached another guy who was a farmer earlier this year, who was the partner of another client that I had coached a few years back. And she had gut symptoms back then. We resolved them. It was really good. When she met her new partner, she said, look, reach out to Ben and we'll go from there. And not much in terms of the fitness goals or anything like that. It was purely just like a lot of gut symptom sort of stuff and nutrition. And he was in a really bad way, you know, and had been so for 10 years. And like literally over 16 weeks, it was like, see ya, you're on your way. You don't need to coach with me anymore.
It's amazing.
This is a really great outcome.
Yeah.
But we're going to finish up our journey together. And I just want to make this clear, because before you reach out to me again and think you need to work just because you have some reappearance of these symptoms, because in my experience, you're just not going to go through life like never experiencing some of these symptoms again. I've never heard of that. Do you know what I mean? For someone who's been suffering them for 10 years, I'm just like, the best outcome that I have seen so far, and I'm still waiting, like, you know, time will tell, is that you kind of do it until you stuff it all up again. And how do you stuff it all up again? Well, we know how. Like, you can have a really big weekend with the boys on the drink. Do you know what I mean? You're going to push some of these foods, which we kind of realize probably aren't so good in the frequency that you were consuming them, and you're going to like just cluster them all in, and then you're going to have a reappearance of some of these symptoms. And I said, before you reach out to me, we just figured out a system that works for you, right? Here's what I'm going to put money on is going to happen. You're going to have those like supplements and the skills that you've got around your nutrition now are on the ready. And then you're going to go back and you're just going to tighten up the ship now. You know, you're just going to like, okay, I'm going to go back to what I did when I was working with Ben. And you're probably going to resolve it in 4 weeks, not 16. Okay?
You go back to the system.
You just get back and you just need to touch up. It's like a maintenance now. You know what I mean? It's like a service. Like rather than like a big service, it's just like that. And that's what I found like with a lot of people who have these ongoing gut symptoms is for the most part, over time, they're symptom free. They have a little bit of a recurrence, a bit of a flare up. They incorporate like the system that worked, but for a shorter duration of time. And then they continue symptom free. And then basically their excursions from being great, from having like no symptoms, just get less and less and less to the point where it's just never worth reaching out to someone for help again. You got it. You know how to do it. And it doesn't take long. That is winning in every sense of the word for me.
I think that's a successful coach is someone who solves their clients' problems and makes them autonomous. Because I'm trying to think, what are we? What are we really doing? Well, I think we're like a gymnastic coach that's teaching our gymnasts, our clients, routines of how to deal with certain obstacles. All right, you got the pommel horse, you got the bars, the beams, right? And each of those are different challenges in someone's life. Gut issues, stress issues, training challenges, how to manage your own nutrition in a surplus, in a deficit. And once we teach you enough gymnast routines, the coach can step back and say, all right, you're good. You can compete. You don't need me anymore. You are off to go.
100%, man. And that's why, when we put together the gut workshop, I like that workshop, right? Because it's basically the content that we're talking about now. It's a little bit more of the details and stuff like that. And then there's the cheat sheet. You know what I mean? And we give you the cheat sheet so that you don't need coaching. or so that if you're a client of ours and you are getting coaching because there's many other things that you want to achieve, it makes our job easier. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to need a coach to solve all of these problems if you can just understand some of the fundamentals that we're talking about right now and have a bit of a system to put them into place.
Absolutely.
That's why that cheat sheet is sequenced in the right kind of fashion. It's start here. These are the big ticket items, the low-hanging fruit, whatever you want to call it.
See, and this is interesting because this is not within our best self-interest to say this, because we could easily keep this information to ourselves and allude to the fact that we have the answers. And then all of you come to us and you all right, give us money, and then we give you the solution. But by giving these answers, I hope that there is some trust developed that, okay, we realize that we can't work with all of you. So because of that, we want to give a lot of you freedom and solutions, and just on some integrity and value things, like you said, man, not everybody needs a health professional or a coach or a naturopath or a dietitian. Implementing
the client
some of the
that
basics.
achieves everything they need to achieve when they're with you and doesn't need you anymore is your biggest fan.
Yeah.
They are your raving advocate.
Clip that.
Yeah. You don't need to retain that client because that little client is going to funnel people to you for the rest of your days. Do you know what I mean? This is like when coaches and personal trainers talk about retention, and we've had this discussion as well, about retaining clients and things like that. And I'm like, sometimes you sign off with the client. Like this guy that I worked with early in the year, like I told you, I had such a great relationship, but I really enjoyed every single conversation I had with him. He was so funny, and he was just very different. I don't get to work with many guys that are, on the land, literally farming. There's no training conversations and exercise, and it was such an enjoyable coaching experience for me. But 16 weeks into it, I'm like, man, have a great life.
Yeah.
It's been so much fun, but I'm going to finish you up here. You are done. And I said, you can always reach out for me if you ever want to come back and coach for this or anything else. But I said, what I prefer? I prefer that you've got the knowledge, you've got the way, you go ahead, you run into one of these excursions down the line where you got some symptoms, you incorporate everything that we went through, and you just send me a message and say, hey bro, I hope you're well, I had a little bit of a flare up, put this into place, solved it straight away. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, that's what I want.
That's it?
That's it.
No, but is that it? I think that's it. I think we're done.
Done, man.
If you guys want to get around it and ask us questions on more on this topic, then follow up. Discord link is in the description or in our Instagram bios, and you can see some of the workshops we've done.
We're going to run that workshop again.
Yeah,
so we'll definitely get some more people, some new people in and do that gut workshop, because it's a good workshop.
So if you've got any questions for that next workshop, put them in the comments and we'll talk to you soon. Sheesh. You should all be fixed now.